Okay, here are a number of other very important concepts. We're not going to go through all of them. I'll send it to you as a handout, and you can look it over. But these are some of the most important ones. The idea that art is a mirror. The idea that the function of the work of art is to hold a mirror up to reality, and especially to hold a mirror up to human beings, so that when you read a poem like Beowulf or a poem like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, your obligation is to ask yourself, self, do I see myself reflected in this mirror in any way? If people are sinning, do I see myself, my own sins reflected? If people are behaving well, I should take them as models for my own behavior. So the main purpose of art during this period is an ethical, moral, spiritual purpose. It's designed to help us become better human beings, better spiritually, better morally, better ethically in the way we treat other human beings, but especially in our relationship with God. So, one thing I want you to do as we read through the literature this term is ask yourself, is this person behaving the way God would want him to behave? Is this other person setting a good example? If so, then I should try to follow that example. So think of art, particularly in this case, works of literature, as a mirror held up not simply to reflect the world, but to reflect the way human beings are behaving in the world. All right, this is a fancy term, epideictic literature. It just means literature that either praises morality, praises virtue, or blames immorality, blames vice. That's another key purpose of the literature during this period. It is meant to celebrate virtue, celebrate goodness, celebrate people who behave the way God intended us all to behave. On the other hand, the literature of this period is also meant to blame vice, to mock foolish, idiotic, irrational behavior. Not because we want to pick on the characters in the literature of this period, but because we always want to use the literature to reflect on our own values and on our own actions and on our own choices. Egyptian gold, this is the idea that when the Hebrews fled from Egypt, when they got away from being slaves to Pharaoh, they took as much Egyptian gold with them as they could get their hands on. Not because they were greedy, but because they wanted to use that gold for the glory of God. And that's how we're supposed to think about every single thing in the world, potentially as something that we can use for the glory of God. Not for our glory, but to glorify God. Finally, we'll just cut the discussion of the handout off at this point. The idea of wasting time. Remember, time for these people was very short. Most of us today can look forward to living 60, 70, even 80 years old, some people into their 90s. This was not true during this period. It was an exceptional person who lived to old age. You could die in many different ways. You could die from sickness. You could die by being killed in battle. So these people had a very strong sense of the idea that time was precious, time was a gift given to us by God, and we should use time uh, profitably. And when I say profitably, I don't mean accumulating riches. I mean accumulating spiritual riches, moral riches. We should uh, be able to die with clear consciences. We should be able to die knowing or at least hoping that we have fulfilled the mission that God sent us down here to fulfill, which is to be very faithful reflections of God Himself. Of course, few of us are going to achieve uh, that ideal, which is why we need God's mercy and we need God's grace. So, those are some of the key ideas that are going to be uh, central to practically every single thing we read this term. I should stress that these are basically all Christian ideas because the writers and readers of the period that we're going to be studying were Christians. They took their religion very seriously. It was one of the things that helped give meaning to their lives. It was one of the things that helped them uh, feel that their lives weren't just completely uh, full of suffering, full of bad change. Now, I'm not going to be trying to convert you to Christianity. That is not my goal at all. I don't want to make the class sound like the old time gospel hour, but we can't really understand the literature of this period unless we understand just how seriously these people took their religion, which was the Christian religion.